You know, it was interesting. Olivia, she saw Charge of the Light Brigade and she hated her performance. She hated the movie. She thought, well, first, she didn't like being under contract and being batting her eyes all the time at your dad. She wanted to do more serious work. She didn't like Curtiz at all, so on. So she never saw Robin Hood until she was married, living in France, had two kids, and she went with her daughter to see it. And she said, I was just amazed at Errol, the vitality, the beauty of it. And then she said, I hate having to give Curtiz credit, but I guess he really did know what he was doing. And he did have something to do with that. I guess he was really good. We didn't think so at the time, but he really, really knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
So she was honest about that.
I was going to the airport with an Uber driver, and just a big, tall-looking guy, and we're getting ready to fly out someplace. And I go, "Wow, how tall are you?" And he goes, 6'7". And I went, "Gee, that's like James Arness height." And he goes, "Who's James Arness?" And I went,
Goodbye.
"You ever see Gunsmoke?" And he had heard of that. And I said, "Well, he says, I want to be an actor." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you know who John Wayne is?" And he goes, "Yeah, that guy's got something to do with the airport." That's a true story. That's the situation we're in today. So that's why we're up here sharing our love of the Western genre and these wonderful names of people. This is the history of not just cinema, but the history of America. And that's what we're honoring this week. And your dad, even though he was an Australian, he is part of our heritage now too. So but did he like wearing tights?
Well, he knew he looked good in them. That's for sure. That's what they told him. Yeah. Geez, when I think about my growing up in Hollywood on the farm up there, my dad had bought this Mulholland farm. It was 8.5 acres, and he built and designed the house up there for his pleasure. And he had a really good time until he met my mom. And this was after his first wife, Lily. So he did make an effort to be that family man. He changed the house. He built a nursery, and he did all these things for us. But, as it turns out, one of the reasons he liked being there is that he could tell Jack Warner that he's up at his pool swimming, and he could look right up at him from Warner Brothers, because our house was overlooking Warner Brothers. And he said, "I can tell Jack I'm here. If he needs me, I'm up here." 'Cause he seemed to be always looking for him, right? So, anyways.
What kind of a relationship did he have with Jack Warner?
Well, I was too young to know really personally what any of their relationships were. But
Well, it is part of the monolithic system, and you were under contract, and they pretty much were gods. So
They did have, from what I know, a relationship. Warner called your dad the Baron,
that's right.
and Errol called him Sporting Blood.
That's right.
And there was this kind of fun relationship. I think Jack was fond of your dad, even though he drove him around the bend
Yeah.
on stuff. And I told you the story at the barbecue, but Paul Pacerni, who I knew was in Maramaru with your dad, and they were taking a smoke break outside the soundstage, and a messenger came up with a message from your father, from Jack Warner. He opens it up, and it's, "Errol, you owe $15,000 in long distance phone bills that have nothing to do with this. I insist that you pay this immediately. Jack L. Warner." And Errol borrowed a pencil from the messenger and said, "Dear Jack, I'm willing to overlook this if you are. Love, Errol." So I mean, they had their back and forth, but you know, Errol was such a great star, and let's face it, his pictures were moneymakers for the studio. And in fact, when the 50s, when they started shedding all the contract players, and I think in 51, Jack and Harry Warner eliminated the entire story department. I mean, the assembly line days were over, but they kept Errol on under contract into the 1950s because his pictures were making money.
And not only were his current films making money, like Rocky Mountain last night, that was a moneymaker because they didn't spend much on it, and it was a popular film, but they would take his older films and reissue them as double features, and they would make sometimes more money than the initial release.
He re-released the Sea Wolf and the Seahawk on a double bill, and then they cut 10 minutes out of the Sea Wolf that was missing for 60 years until they finally found an intact print at the Museum of Modern Art, and Warner went ahead and released it on Blu-ray because they didn't release it for years because they knew it was a truncated version, and they finally found the right version. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He would double Robin Hood. All of those films made a ton of money for Warner Brothers, and Errol was a much better actor, in my opinion, than he was ever given credit for. He was an excellent actor.
Yeah.
Peter O'Toole played.
Pardon?
Did you see Peter O'Toole playing?
Yes.
Great movie.
I do think he had a lot of fun making Jack Warner chase him around. Though. Really, out on the boat, them sending people out to look for him.
Absolutely.
So he was chuckling.
Absolutely. It's fun reading the production files of trying to finish Dodge City, and the production suspended. Bruce Cabot and Errol showed up today unable to work. So,
That was their only release from,
being under Curtiz.
It felt like prisoners there.
Yeah,
because-
well, it was interesting. Dodge City, Errol really had to be coerced into doing that because he felt, first, that was going to be a biopic of Wyatt Earp. And then Jack Warner, in his infinite wisdom, wanted Paul Muni to play Wyatt Earp.
Well, those docudramas were doing really well.
And so it ended up where they wanted Errol to do it. And he didn't want to portray someone, the Western and American hero, or, someone prominent like that. So they really had to kind of filibuster. And when you see the film, there's a little bit of dialogue that I think Robert Buckner stuck in, where they're walking down the street and Alan Hale is kind of giving this exposition on who Errol Flynn is in the movie. And he says, he came from Australia, he was herding cattle, he led a hoorah revolution in Cuba. And they did all of that to make Errol feel comfortable. And of course, he was a natural in Western. Yeah.
By the way, the reason they made money when they re-released it is that they charged like 10 times as much at the theater.
And they got it. They got it. Yeah. In Dodge City, where they justify his appearance out west as in Australia, they never did that again in any of his other westerns.
They didn't have to. They didn't have to.
Because he was accepted.
Yeah, this morning when I did my Curtiz presentation, one of the clips I showed was the fight scene from Dodge City that inspired the end of Blazing Saddles. But the Dodge City fight, they actually had 3 sound stages with that fight, and it is the mother of all movie saloon fights. And I found a memo from Hal Wallace to, I think Robert Lord was the producer, saying, we've spent $112,000 with Curtiz filming this fight. We have enough for 6 fights. If it doesn't end today, it will end tomorrow. Wow.
There was a lot. They used a lot of that footage of the generic fight scene you'd see in all the Warner's TV shows.
Well, you'd see all kinds of the Warner Brothers footage in the TV shows in the Rocky Mountain that we showed last night that was written by Alan LeMay of The Searchers fame. He also wrote the pilot for Cheyenne, the Warner Brothers' first television Western production. And not only did they use the script, but they dressed Clint Walker in the same outfit that your dad wore in Rocky Mountain so that they could intercut the action sequences. And that was, they said, well, this works really well. So they did it in all of their shows, Maverick and Sugarfoot. But in Cheyenne, because they cast characters to look like in Rocky Mountain. L.Q. Jones was dressed up to look like Slim Pickens in that film. They had another young actor as Dickie Jones, who was the kid with the dog. And Dickie told me this story, and I thought it was fascinating. He got a call from Warner Brothers to come for this new Western on TV that they were going to do the pilot, Cheyenne. And so he goes, has the meeting, and they don't want him. He owned the dog, that cute little dog that stole every scene in the movie last night. He was insulted. And so he wanted to really charge him a lot, and he gave him some fee amount, and they said, okay. And then when they sent a car to pick up the dog, he said, nope, he gets a limo. So they had to send a limo for that dog to use in the Cheyenne pilot
Well,
episode.
you know that Jack Warner's favorite actor was of all time. Who?
Vincent, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Never asked for a raise. He never complained about his art. He never complained about the food in the commissary.
That was Lassie too.
Yeah, well, those Rin Tin Tin silent movies that were so popular, that's how he got his start.
that was-
Daryl Zanuck writing all of those silent movies.
They changed his name a lot because the distributors were complaining that, I think Zanuck used the name Canfield or Rob Canfield. They said, do you have anyone on staff that writes movies other than this guy Canfield? So Zanuck changed, they got several pseudonyms to write these Rin Tin Tin pictures.
You know, original Ghost Rider, man.
Yeah. Well, Zanuck was, he was obviously the most talented.
Oh, he really was.
Anyone that John Ford would give his film to cut while he went off on the yacht with his dad and Ward Fond to go fishing and drinking.
Had to be worth
He had to have.
Well, he lived and breathed movies, and that was it for him.
Yeah.
But he could look at a script and break it down and say, this is wrong, let's take this out. And nobody's going to argue with him because he was almost always right.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. Well, he left Warner Brothers in '33. He had it out at, I think one of those restaurants with Harry Warner. He did not get along with Harry Warner. And he also realized he was never going to be anything than a highly compensated employee, because that was the famous line when someone would have an argument with Jack Warner. He'd point out the window and say, whose name is on the water tower? Don Siegel told him. It was the verdict. He said, put in an insert of someone striking a match to someone, Peter Lorre, or someone lit a cigarette. And Siegel goes, it's not necessary. Why do we have to go back and do that? He says, whose name's on the water tower? And he says, you and your brother. I said, good, put the friggin' insert in.
You mentioned Don Siegel. He directed Curtiz.
Right.
And he was going to start as an editor. And one of the greatest things he did, and no one else he could have done it with no one else, is that he edited the front part of the titles. My dad starting out young and growing old on the screen.
Right.
And he had all that material from the early days of my dad and edited a beautiful thing. It ended up being, this anachronistic man.
Oh yeah, he started out kicking film cans around because he had a friend of his father's knew Hal Wallace, so he got on there. But he essentially invented the montage department at Warner Brothers, and all those great montages for movies like The Roaring Twenties, Yankee Doodle Dandy. That was all Don Siegel uncredited, and he was so good. Walter Huston and Sidney Greenstreet. Well, Siegel got called in by Jack Warner and chewed him out. He said, why are you sending these people to ask me about directing? And he said, I didn't send any. So apparently Sidney Greenstreet and Walter Huston said, you need to give this guy a chance. And Siegel didn't know anything about it. And of course, Warner assumed he had engineered this, which he had not.
And the first film he directed, I think, The Verdict, with Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that was during the strike. So that was when they had the strike riot between the CSU, the cops, and the IATSE in '46. So Siegel had to hide in the back of a car to get into the studio. And then the set was supposed to be London in the 1890s, but the carpenters were all part of this jurisdictional strike. So Siegel just brought in fog machines. So when you see a boring street, change the set.
Perfect.
During the war, your dad did one of the best World War II movies, Objective Burma.
Looks like we're up a Burmese creek without any paddle.
Okay, Chuck, we'll have to swim out.
Can't do it. Wish we could. We'll have to walk.
Yes.
And I think Raul Walsh maybe directed that.
Yeah,
Objective
he did.
Burma.
He did.
Okay.
Oh,
Boy, your dad was good in that. I
Was
mean,
he?
it was just such an adult movie, and he was solidly believable.
Solid. And to me, it's the same almost performance as Rocky Mountain. I mean, it's the same guy there.
Mhm.
Those two.
Yeah, your dad, Objective Burma, my friend Dick Erdman was in that movie, and they were on location, and they were out, I think, in Calabasas, and then the hill that they were stuck on was the hill near Forest Lawn, stumbling for Burma, and Warner Brothers had the usual, soggy tuna sandwich and bruised apple, crummy box lunch. And these guys are out there in the summer, it's hot,
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the guys that played a Japanese soldier in that, I'm having a senior moment, I can't remember his name. He had a Chinese restaurant in Van Nuys. So Errol talked to him, he brought all this Chinese food out onto the location. And then Errol sent the bill to Jack Warner.
The way to do it.
With love.
The guys. Being the guy.
Yes, but Dick told me, he said there was no one more. He said I used to ride out location with Errol. He said there's nobody that was more fun, more easygoing. But when the cameras were ready to roll, he was on it. He was on it, particularly in that version.
Nobody was a better General Custer than your dad. I don't care who played it.
Yeah.
Your dad in that movie was the epitome of what we want Custer to be. We know Custer wasn't all that great. Errol Flynn as Custer is what we want to believe in. He's the hero we want to believe in. And if you want to see one of the most beautifully played scenes, is the scene where he and Olivia are saying goodbye to each other.
I said, will you marry me when I'm a general?
Oh, Lieutenant.
Oh, it's easy to become a general. Then that old that nice old father of yours will be proud of me.
It is, if you don't get a lump in your throat, have no.
Tearjerker
I-
every
Yeah.
time.
And
every
it's
time.
so beautifully put. And they aren't acting. There's
I
not.
think
this-
that was their last scene together in the movies, period.
Yeah, that was the eighth film that I did with her.
Too, I think.
Yeah.
But it is so well played. You watch that, there is not one shred, one hint of two actors acting, or he's waiting for his line to say, it's all like you're there. It's real. And it's just, God almighty. And when your dad goes about the broken watch and he breaks, deliberately. And it's one of the greatest scenes, I think, in film history. It really is.
Well, your dad was in a lot of memorable scenes
And-
like that,
They
too.
probably did a lot of takes on that. I don't know if they did, but I do know that in Robin Hood, Olivia really liked taking those takes over a couple of times. The scene was, she said.
There is a story about
Yeah,
the father
you
and
could-
those green tights.
That's right. She couldn't resist. Right? She kept messing up the kiss, is what she said. So
Yeah,
they could
yeah.
do it again.
That was interesting. Olivia, she saw Charge of the Light Brigade and she hated her performance. She hated the movie. She thought, well, first, she didn't like being under contract and batting her eyes all the time at your dad. She wanted to do more serious work. She didn't like Curtiz at all, so on. So she never saw Robin Hood until she was married, living in France, had 2 kids, and she went with her daughter to see it. And she said, I was just amazed at Errol, the vitality, the beauty of it. And then she said, I hate having to give Curtiz credit, but I guess he really did know what he was doing. And he did have something to do with that. I guess he was really good. We didn't think so at the time, but he really knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
So she was honest about that.
Well, I'm glad you wrote that book about him because it does open up to another generation to go into those films, those classics, and the ones that aren't classics, and see what a magnificent director he was. Because he, just like we were talking about, Daryl Zanuck, they lived and breathed movies, and that's all it was. That's what they wanted to do, and boy, he was good. It's the way the camera was always moving, and he kept things going, and then they'd complain at the front office, he's taking too long, too many setups, and he would do it anyway.
Yeah, I think you could sum up Jack Warner's history of guidance to Curtiz and his other directors in 2 words, and that is hurry up. that was Jack. You're shooting too many angles. It's taking too long. And really, not to excuse his bad behavior at times, but he was under that constant pressure of Jack Warner sending memos and people to the set and you're taking too long and everything. And his job was to block that all out because he would agree with Hal Wallace, I'll do whatever you want. And then he'd go to the location set and do what he wanted.
Yes.
He'd change wardrobe, change dialogue and so on because Curtiz believed this is my movie. Even though it was there. He always believed the movie was his.
Rory has told us about her dad, Errol Flynn, but Michael Blake's father, Larry Blake, also has an amazing story. So tell us a little bit more about your dad's career.
My dad started out doing vaudeville. He used to do impersonations. And he became a headliner at the Roxy Theater in New York, the Rainbow Room. And he was approached by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, RKO, and Universal for a screen test. So Dad chose Universal. And he went to Universal, and he was in, their big film was going to be, at that time, was going to be The Road Back, sequel to All Quiet on the Western Front. And Dad played one of the soldiers in it. He gets shot, and he had to fall on the cobblestone on the back lot of the old Hunchback set. No knee pads. None of this. Years later, I saw his legs were all mottled, from bruising. James Whale, the director, had him do it 36 times.
Oh.
And so they released the movie. Germany this is 1937. They didn't like the movie and the way they were portrayed. So Universal drastically cut the film because they still needed the German market for making money. And Dr. Georges Giesling, who later became one of the publicity people for the Third Reich, he was head of the German consulate in LA, and they sent a letter to all the actors saying your films will no longer be shown in Germany. And when Germany invaded Poland about a week later, they brought my dad back. My dad was the first American actor to play Hitler in a movie. And they had shot some additional scenes to stick into the movie in hopes they could make money off it. It didn't do any good. Well, Dad was young and he's hitting the button. He walked in one day to Universal and said, take your contract and stick it. And he said he walked out and he went, oh.
Not good career.
No, it wasn't. He went into the Navy and he was in the North Atlantic and they were going to get dishonorable discharge because of his drinking. My Irish grandmother walked into the offices of the U.S. Navy in New York City. I had no idea what she said, but they transferred Dad to the Pacific and he was in charge of, he was helping put the battleship Iowa in commission, and they finally mustered him out with an honorable discharge. He went to a hospital with hopes of drying out. And while he was there, he put on a variety show for the Navy and the Marines. And in the audience was a Jesuit priest named Father John Corley. And I swear to God, when I met him 30 years later, if he had had a cleft in his chin, he would have looked just like Pat O'Brien in each particular place. And he knew my dad's backstory. And he said, yeah, your dad told a joke about the Catholics I didn't appreciate. So he said, he's mine. He went after my dad. Of course, my dad said, oh, I don't have a problem. And finally, one day, Father Corley had enough. He grabbed him by the shirt collar, slammed him against the wall, and said, I'm willing to give up this collar and my priestly vows if it'll get you sober. What do you want to do? In 1947, Dad and Louis Alberni started the first motion picture AA group in a small building outside Paramount Studios.
Yeah.
Dad was only full time up until he passed away. And he came back and he always said I never got to where I was, but he did appear in a lot of films, High Noon, Sunset Boulevard. Some films, some directors or casting directors wouldn't hire him because they knew he was sober now and they were kind of, oh, I don't know, or I'm an alcoholic, I don't want him to, but he did it. And then when I was 2, he decided, I told him I wanted to be an actor. So I started following along in his footsteps and then got smart and became a makeup artist. And that's where I first worked with Patrick. I was telling him the other day when he was doing the series with Shirley Jones. I was at Universal. I spent my first 3.5
What was the series?
Shirley.
Oh.
And I'd get hired if I didn't have a regular show going. You'd go here, you'd go there. And one day I was sent down to help Jack Barron, the head makeup guy. And Jack said, you need to watch the set for me. Go watch Patrick and this other actor. I had to get Shirley done. And okay, so I went up to him and said, hi, I'm watching you. Okay.
And we still are. We're still watching. Yeah.
I tried to use Patrick as a deal to get a mini bike. He lived around the corner from me back in '67, and I saw him go by one day riding a mini bike. And that's really cool. I wanted a mini bike. My dad said, nope, not going to happen. So I thought, he was my age. I laid it out on the table. I said, well, John Wayne's son Patrick has a mini bike. Why didn't I have one? It didn't work. No,
It didn't work.
you were no help.
There very rarely, as an actor, do you ever pull one over on the studios. But on the Shirley show,
Yeah.
I think I was hired to work at 20 out of 36 episodes, something like that. And I got paid for 23 episodes. And about 6 months later, they realized the accounting that had done it. And they called my agent and said, "Oh, we overpaid him that." And my agent said, "He spent that money. Hire him to do more work."
Well, the movies are ours and yours. Thank you all for sharing these great stories. Patrick Wayne, Michael Blake, Alan Rohde, Rory Flynn.
Such a pleasure to meet you guys. Really.